Welcome to ATRE Podcast, all things real estate. Now, in today's episode, we're diving deep into the legal intricacies of lawsuits with the National Association of Realtors and various real estate companies across the United States. I'm particularly excited to welcome Jason Zweig, a graduate of Indiana University and Columbia Law School. Jason's been practicing law for about 25 years and is currently a principal at Bartco LLP. Now, that firm is based in San Francisco, but Jason practices out of its Chicago office. Jason specializes in representing plaintiffs and defendants in complex litigation, primarily antitrust litigation, and has recovered billions of dollars for his clients. Now, Jason is the perfect guide to help us navigate through these complex waters. For our listeners, whether you're a real estate agent, a buyer, a seller, a seasoned entrepreneur, or simply just intrigued by the legal and business aspects of real estate, you're in for a treat. Today's discussion is not just about understanding the current legal battles, but it's about gaining insight into the strategies and drive success that learning about the potential implications for the real estate industry as a whole. So as we unravel the complexities of this massive lawsuit, and we delve into the legal tactics and business wisdom behind these disputes, our aim is to shed light and truth on what's really happening and what it could mean for the future of real estate. Welcome, Jason, and thank you so much for being on ATRE Podcast and sharing all of your expertise with us.
Brad, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much. I actually think this might be my first ever podcast. So
I'm honored.
I'm delighted to do it with you, and really appreciate you having me on. As you might suspect, and me being a lawyer, I should say that I'm involved in the litigation that you referenced. There's quite a bit of litigation out there, and I'm involved in some aspects of it. So what we talk about today and my opinions that I give today will be those of my own opinions and not those of my clients. So just
thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're representing? Are you representing the defense or the plaintiffs?
Sure, defense.
Okay. So for our listeners, is that the MLS, or is that real estate agents? Is that companies? What is that?
Sure. So maybe I should take a step back and just kind of give a broad overview of kind of the landscape of the litigations.
Sure. So why don't you answer this question and then tell us what part you play? So can you provide us like an overview of the current legal challenges that's facing these real estate companies, the MLSs and the Board of Realtors in California or the United States, whichever you prefer, and tell us who you are and what you're doing?
You got it. So a few years ago, there were some class action lawsuits filed in Missouri and in Chicago, the Northern District of Illinois, where I am. Two major class actions that focused on specific areas of the country. The Missouri case focused on Missouri, and the Illinois case focused on a variety of different areas in the country, but not the entire country. And those were lawsuits against the National Association of Realtors and several of the largest real estate brokerages in the country, like Keller Williams or Remax and those kinds of names.
Nationwide companies.
Exactly. And so the allegations there were that the National Association of Realtors rule that requires a listing broker to offer compensation to the buyer's broker, and the various realtors boards that agreed to adhere to that rule, and the realtors that agreed to adhere to that rule, which you had to because that was the National Association of Realtors rule.
Correct.
And so the allegation was that that rule was anti-competitive, because it essentially caused the seller to pay more for their real estate broker services than they would otherwise have to pay if that rule didn't exist. And why would a seller pay for the buyer's broker? Because essentially the seller's broker is splitting that money that the seller is paying to the seller broker. And so in effect, the seller is also paying not only his own broker, but the buyer's broker as well. And so those were the allegations in the suit. And the case went to trial last October, and the defendants, the National Association of Realtors and several of the large national real estate brokerages were hit with a verdict for $1.7 billion, I believe it was, single damages. And what I mean by that is under the antitrust laws, and this was an antitrust case, a verdict is tripled, or what we call treble damages. And so under the trebling, by automatically that 1.7 becomes, you do math all day long, whatever the math works out to, about 5 billion.
1.21, yeah.
And so following that verdict, a number of lawsuits were then filed throughout the country, including 3 in California. One case filed in Oakland, one case filed in Sacramento, and one case filed in Los Angeles. Right. And those cases, the Los Angeles case focused on the Los Angeles area, the Sacramento case, the Sacramento area, and the Oakland case focused on 5 counties north of San Francisco.
So Jason, so when you're, just for the viewers, when you're saying that there was one case filed focusing on the Los Angeles area, let's just say, it's not just one case, one company. You're the actual lawsuit that could have 20 companies in that lawsuit, correct?
Correct. So yeah, when I say it's one case, it's one complaint that will have named as defendants, somewhere, like you just said, maybe closer to 20 different defendants. It would have, they would have an MLS, and I apologize, I don't remember the MLS name in Los Angeles, but whatever
there's
that
several
was.
different ones, but there's for instance, I'm in the San Fernando Valley. We have the San Fernando Valley Association of Real Estate.
Right.
In, Ventura County, it could be Conejo, and there's a lot of different boards that all act and work together.
Yep.
Are a smaller part of the California Association of Real Estate, and then obviously national. But so realtors, for us, what we're a little confused on is, like you said, Jason, we've just been following the rules and doing everything that we've been told to do, and for the past 100 years, the sellers have been paying not. It's funny. It's not necessarily a buyer's commission. It is, but the commission is actually paid to, for instance, I'm with Pinnacle. I go in and I negotiate a commission, and then in the listing contract, will let the seller know this is a portion of my commission that you're paying our company that I'm going to offer to a buyer's agent. And that does attract buyers because, see, in today's world, what's confused me a little, Jason, is that on the news, they're saying that the reason this was so unfair to buyers is that buyers would, for instance, say they're looking at a $900,000 house, but an agent will say, no, I'm going to show you $1.2 million so I can get more commission. And they call that steering. Mm-hmm. However, that's so inaccurate. I could understand where they're saying, hey, it's unfair to a seller to be paying this amount of money and, a buyer to be getting it. But what they're saying is they're actually going after real estate agents and saying what you're doing is dishonest because you're steering a client to a more expensive property, which we never do. When a client, it's funny, when a client looks at properties nowadays, they're calling us and they're saying, hey, I talked to my lender, or can you set me up with a lender? I qualify for $900,000. It does me no good to show them a property for $1.2 million if they don't qualify for it. So that's just something that I saw in the news that I thought, wow, that's a really odd complaint.
Couple things. But first of all, Brad, let me just circle back and just to close out the description of the cases, and then I'll come back and hit what you just talked about. So in those California cases, I'm involved in the Oakland case and the Sacramento case. In the Oakland case, my firm represents Barry's or the Bay Area Real Estate Information System, which is the MLS there. And then in Sacramento, MetroList, as well as 8 different realtor associations that are members of MetroList, as well as a brokerage. And so we're involved. Those are the cases we're involved with, and the types of defendants that my firms were defending. To address the steering point, what I have read, and I have no doubt that a broker that has integrity like you would never do this. But as in every industry, there are always bad actors. And what I have read, and in fact, this evidence was given to the Department of Justice, is that some brokers, it's not as much that they will steer their buyer to a more expensive house. It is that the MLS discloses what the seller broker is offering as compensation.
2 separate things, though.
Yeah, well, that's what at least what I've seen is referred to as steering. So
no. So I agree with you. So if you're saying to me, hey, look, because when I go out on listing appointments, okay, I will tell a broker, look, here's what I charge, but I will never discount the commission on a buyer's side, because I want them to get the buyer's agent to get whatever they can to show your house. I don't want to do you a disservice by offering less. But for me, if I'm going to give you a discount, I'm going to take that all on my side. So where I can see that some agents might go, well, that agent's only offering 1.5%. That house is offering 2.5%. I'd rather show that one.
Right.
I have never done that. I find that
I'm sure you have.
And that's really a dishonest thing. And as you said, there's bad actors and everything. But if that was the complaint, I could understand where they were coming from. Not that I agree with it, but at least there's some validity to it, especially with more inexperienced agents that would put their commission before their clients' needs. Mm-hmm. So I can't tell you the amount of houses I look at that I don't even know what the commission is. I'm just showing the houses that my client wants to see, and it's irrelevant to me as long as my client is happy.
Right.
So what I guess I'm asking you, so that's the first matter. As you know, we're reading a lot about, we're going to be using buyer broker agreements, which we've used for years and years and years. I never have my client sign them. My clients sign them because I always felt like, hey, I don't want you to have to work with me. I want you to want to work with me. Mm-hmm. I know that if I'm doing my job, you're going to buy a house from me and I'm going to get paid. But now, with this changing landscape, Jason, and correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like we're going to have no choice but to have a buyer broker agreement. It's going to be negotiable, obviously, with what I negotiate with the buyer. And then the MLS will no longer offer compensation in the MLS. Is that correct? From what you've read? Okay.
Yes. There's a lot of different, little details and nuance to it, but at high level, all of what you just said is accurate. The MLS will no longer have a field, if you will, in the listing that discloses what the compensation is.
Well, because there is no compensation by the seller, unless. So let's just jump into this.
Hold on. The seller can still provide compensation to the buyer under this settlement. It just cannot be done via the MLS. But there's an exception to that too, which is that if it's in the same brokerage. So, as I understand, you work for Pinnacle, and within Pinnacle, brokers can disclose what the compensation is to another broker in Pinnacle, for example. But outside of Pinnacle, you would not be able to, as I understand.
So let me ask another question, because there's several ways that this is going to work, right? I feel that so one is buyers, especially first-time buyers, have a hard enough time affording even their closing costs, let alone coming up with money, no matter what it is, negotiated with a buyer's agent. So that's the first thing that when the DOJ or whomever says we're doing a really great thing for buyers. Not necessarily, because what I'm worried about is a couple different things. One is I'm worried that loans are now going to absorb the buyer's agent's commission, and the buyers are just going to get more into debt, and they're going to be having to put that on the back end. So loan officers are going to love it, right? Banks are going to love it. The other thing is that though there might be buyers that say, I don't need a buyer's agent at all. But then what happens, Jason? So it's kind of like when an attorney represents themselves in court, right? What do you have? A fool for a client? So I'm afraid that a buyer may say, I'm going to represent myself. I'll call the listing agent and I'll tell them that I want to write an offer myself, and I'll write an offer. But in California, at least, and I'm sure in most places, we've got 48 pages between the real estate contract and disclosures and everything else. There's no way a buyer is going to understand it. And then what happens if they don't have an agent? Am I supposed to explain it to someone who's not my client? Where legally am I going to, am I going to get sued for them not understanding it when they're not my client? Is there going to be companies that pop up that say, I'll do your paperwork for $1,000? But then what about the home inspection? What about the different inspections that need to be done, the contingencies that need to be signed? So there's so many things that, we have to worry about. And I don't think they're doing a buyer's any service by not being too clear on that and opening it up for, true capitalism to come in and rip them apart. So they're attacking real estate agents and real estate brokers who, as you said, there are some bad actors, but most of us just want to do a great job and see our clients happy and sell them homes over and over through the years. Most of every seller I've had since I've been in my 26 years has made money on their homes because the market has just been, increasingly good. So they're not always saying, when you're making $300,000 and $400,000 equity, I don't want to pay a buyer's agent to show my house. So where do you see the landscape coming for real estate?
Well, you raise, as always, a number of very interesting points. I think there's a lot of people out there that are making prognostications about what the settlement will mean. There's a lot of news articles saying things like, this is the end of the 6% commission and all kinds of things like that. I think the only real thing that can be said at this point is that nobody knows how all of these questions that you raise are going to ultimately end up. It could be that, for example, sellers are going to be paying less in commission for the sale of their house. However, if there are less buyer brokers and less buyers, there's, the laws of supply and demand are such that the price of the house might not be sold for as much. You're going to have less buyers, therefore less competition. So it may be that you might be paying less in commission, but you may be also realizing less on the sale of your house because there's going to be less buyers. Is that going to happen? No, I can't say that for sure, but it's a very plausible thing that could happen. In terms of the situation on the buyer side, you raise a number of interesting issues with the nature of buyers and concerns about debt and things of that, and how they're going to negotiate.
How they're going to be protected.
How they're going to be protected. I think they're apparently, and I confess to not being an expert on this particular question, there's apparently a question about whether a buyer can finance through a traditional mortgage product the commission to be paid to a broker.
Right.
I think there's from what I've seen, and this is just articles that I've read, not based on any particular unique knowledge I have, but there are considerations being made at Fannie and Freddie about whether those kinds of things can be rolled into a mortgage on the buyer side, a buyer broker commission, for example? I
No,
don't,
and
it's an unsettled question.
yeah, and I think if they do that, Jason, I think that one of the things they may consider, just as far as like legal challenges that are going to affect the day-to-day operations, and that when they're trying to sort this out, one of the other things may be that sellers are able to offer closing cost credits to a buyer, and that buyer, so for instance, maybe a seller says in remarks, right? Hey, seller is willing to offer 2.5 or 3% credit to buyers for closing costs. Buyer to do what they wish with that. Because if someone's having problems selling a house, so I think that the day-to-day operations are going to change dramatically, but we're going to figure it out.
Yes.
And it's going to end up being okay. And I think people won't be, coming into real estate like they were in droves, because the old thing was when someone got their real estate license, people used to say to buyers and their friends and family that were buying, hey, it doesn't cost you anything to use me. So use me and let me learn off of you.
Right.
I don't think that they're going to be so eager to let a new agent who's not on a team be they don't want to be the guinea pig for them anymore.
Yeah.
I think there'll be a lot more learning in day to day for people, and the strong will survive.
Yeah, and I certainly, look, you and all of your broker colleagues who work hard and are just trying to do right by your clients. This has been a very unsettling time, and I know that from talking to you and talking to my clients, and I don't envy the consternation that you've had to experience over the last really several years, and so. None of us as human beings, particularly when we're talking about our careers, want things to change if we have, and this goes beyond legal, this is just philosophical,
Right.
but, want things to change in terms of their income and their lifestyle and the way their business operates and, having certainty, knowing how things operate. But and now that's kind of been thrown into
It
chaos
is.
a little bit.
Yeah, it is.
But I think the good news, at least from my perspective, is, and you kind of just touched on it in your last remarks, is I think it will be okay. I think there will be some adjustments that need to be made and some settling out.
Right.
But, real estate brokers provide a valuable service, and they are not going away. They're not going to have to do it for free. There will have to be a market recalibration.
Yeah.
And there may be, it may eat into some of the profits, but it may not. We'll just have to see.
Any of my clients will always tell anyone, when a client says to me, hey, Brad, I need some help, I can't afford this, I'm the first one to say, let me help you. Let's figure out a way, and I negotiate or drop the commission to what fits their needs. But real estate agents, if you go to your doctor's office, or you go to your mechanic, or you go to the store, anywhere you go, you don't know what their profit is or what they're making. With real estate agents, you go, oh, you made $22,000 on this deal, and I always have to say, I still have to pay my company. I still have to pay my taxes. I still have to pay all of my advertising. What's my time worth? As a real estate agent, I don't get vacations. I go on vacation. I answer my phone. I bring my computer. My phone rings at 7 a.m. and it rings at 11 o'clock at night.
Yep.
So people don't realize that we're working the good ones are working 7 days a week, and we're working really hard. And I find it disheartening that our commissions are so out there, and it's not the true value, A, of what we do, or B, of what we bring home. So I hope that helps when you're defending all of us in court. It's just, it's not fun to always have the conversations of what we're making when they really don't understand.
No, and yeah, and I've dealt with that in the legal realm where we have a let's just say a class action,
Mhm.
and you have to make an application to the court to get paid, and all of what you're seeking in terms of compensation is in the public record, and
Yeah.
news outlets see the dollars and they just say, oh my God, that objectively speaking is a big number, but
Yeah.
they don't look behind the number
They
and
don't
see
see the
all the
expert
work.
witnesses and all the other things that
Yeah,
go.
see all of the work that went into that, the risk that you took in
Yeah.
terms of in a contingency fee matter where you were out of pocket millions of dollars. And so
And that's a great point as well, especially in today's, the current real estate market that we're in. Uh, I'm having houses that I'm selling 3 and 4 times. I'm doing all the work 3 or 4 times because, it keeps falling out of escrow for financing issues or inspections. And I'm doing 4 times the amount of work, getting paid less. And that's just part of the gig. That's just what happens. And that's okay.
yep,
But
but
people don't
people don't know
understand.
that.
People don't understand what we're doing. Jason, how would you address the balance between the regulatory compliance and fostering a competitive, innovative real estate market?
um that's an interesting question. I by and large, I'm a believer in the free market. And less regulation, let the market figure itself out.
Right.
And so, I know in the context of real estate, there are, and particularly with this settlement, I mean, this settlement creates regulation, right? And so, it's
Good or
going to
bad.
create a number of restrictions and different kinds of things that realtors and MLSs and realtor boards are going to have to comply with. Some of which arguably may be good, and some of which might go a little bit too far.
Yeah.
But as a general matter, I think the situation in the real estate market is different in that it has worked in a certain way for so long
Right.
that at least one jury felt that it shouldn't work that way anymore. And so, unfortunately, for it to change, there has to be some, regulation to create that change. But as a general matter, competition is the best force in terms of getting the best prices, the most innovation, all and best service.
Let me ask you, Jason, though, what are the drawbacks of moving towards, for a buyer's agent, an hourly wage model for buyer's agents, and how would this shift impact the relationship between agents and buyers? Because for me, I think that if I was paying someone to show the house, right? Let's say we said, I'll give you $20 an hour, you go show my client these houses, even if it's another licensed agent, where does their fiduciary duty end? Or where would mine end, unless I'm then, hey, we're going to charge you by the hour to show houses. We're then going to charge you to do the contracts. We're then going to charge you to do the inspections. Because the problem is again, in California, most buyers don't have an extra 20 or 25,000, 50,000 to pay a buyer's agent. So there's, again, in fair trade, right? There's going to be some sort of negotiation. How do you see that being calculated?
Well, I think that, and really, I'd be, and you kind of addressed it a little bit, more curious to hear your thoughts. I mean, as a non-real estate professional, as a lawyer,
Right.
and as a prospective buyer or seller, I think that paying a broker by the hour is probably a terrible
Expensive.
idea. Well, it's more than that. And look, this is an issue that comes up all the time with lawyers. There are lawyers that bill by the hour, and then there are lawyers that bill based on the success of the case or a
Right.
contingency fee. And there's a debate in the legal community and pretty much any hourly based billing business about whether the incentives between the service provider and the client are really aligned.
And that's where you get, I'm sorry, Jason, and that's where you, with the hourly wage, is where you're going to get these agents that just kind of need money. They need an hourly wage.
Well, it's not only that piece of it, Brad, in my opinion, it incentivizes them to just work for the sake of working and
Sure.
not necessarily being effective, and wasting time so that they can get more money.
There's no fiduciary duty.
There's a misalignment of incentives and between the client and the broker in an hourly model like that, in my opinion. And so I doubt that will get much traction. I have you heard of that being?
Yeah, so there is a pretty big company out there that's online based that does pay hourly. So what they do is they pay agents to go show properties. If then the client likes the property, they then will go and have someone they've never met, another agent, go and represent them. And every time I've ever dealt with any of these agents, they go from one agent to the next agent. One, it's very hard to build a relationship with another agent and really get to know who their clients are and get to know how the agent works when they're constantly flopping. You know, one person shows up for this, one person shows up for that, one person shows up for that. So it in my opinion, that's a real disservice to the buyers in general. And it makes me nervous to think that there'll be more agents like that, or there might be companies that came, there used to be companies out in the late 90s, early 2000s called Help You Sell. And Help You Sell was a discount brokerage that said, we can sell your house cheaper and we're better than all these brokers. Well, as you can see now, there's no Help You Sells because they didn't last. People would use them who wanted to save money, but oftentimes it costs them more money because when you have someone who's inexperienced and really is putting all they want is their money, they're not answering their phone at 9 at night like we are. They're
That's
not
right.
putting their clients' needs first. I mean, all I care about is my clients. Every client I have will tell you that they feel I could have 10 deals going and every client feels like I'm their only client. Because that's how I want them to feel. In those kind of models, Jason, I see a big breakdown. That's where it saddens me to see my, real estate industry that I've loved for 26 years, if it fell into that kind of model.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, nobody really knows how everything will play out. However, to me, and again, this is just total opinion. I am, you would have a better basis to kind of foresee whether something like this could take hold at being in the business, whereas I'm just, a lawyer.
But you are hearing a little bit in the back end, aren't you? Like
a little bit, but I at the same time, I just, it just, there will always be people who are trying to innovate and disrupt, a particular industry. But, just thinking about it, the hourly model is, it just doesn't seem like it would align the incentives between the client and the broker.
Right.
It incentivizes the broker to do needless work that doesn't benefit the client.
It just worries me again, who's protecting the buyer in that instance. If I'm representing a seller, of course they're going to be protected, but I also can't help but feel bad for that buyer who's spending, maybe every last penny they have now to get a house, and they're not being represented, who's explaining all the paperwork, who's answering all their questions and holding their hands, because there's a lot of people who need hand holding and they need to understand what's going on. Do you think, Jason? Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna, I think that there's probably the at least from what I can tell, and again, nobody really knows how this is going to turn out.
Right.
But except for the fact that there seems to be a greater likelihood on the sell side that the seller will be paying probably less than they were paying before.
For
However,
sure, if they're not offering a closing costs
correct.
or a commission, it's going
I,
to be a greater conversation, though, don't you think, with
I,
sellers?
yes, totally. I do, but I do think the greatest number of questions exist on the buy side, obviously. And who's, like you said, who's going to take care of the buyer? How are they going to pay for a broker? Are they going to use a broker? Are buyer brokers going to become fewer and far between? There's a whole host of questions, very, very much less questions on the sell side.
And that's scary too, because there's going to be a lot less brokers willing to work for peanuts, and these buyers are going to want to see properties. It's just there's going to be so much to deal with and so much education, I think, which is a good thing because I'm always out for learning. But I think it's so important. It's great that sellers will pay a little less. But the way they're acting on the news channels, which I think they're getting some erroneous information, is that it's so great for buyers. This is wonderful for buyers as well. And I don't necessarily believe that buyers all of a sudden having to come out of pocket or put more money on their loan is such a great thing.
Yeah, I think
know?
I 100%. I think when you're seeing headlines like that, that this settlement slashes the commission from 6%. There won't be 6%.
And it hasn't been 6% in years. The thing is look, we're all full service brokers, the good ones at least, and I charge 6%. That's what I charge. However, if I'm on a listing appointment and the seller says, absolutely not, I'd like to negotiate, I'd like to do this. As I said, every time I said, let me help you, let's figure this out. But I always want to give 2.5% to the buyer's agent out of this commission. I don't want to hurt you guys. I want everyone to see this property because there are those bad actors, right? There are those people that may not show it. So I'm not one of them. So I understand where the lawsuit stems and comes from, but it bothers me again when they aren't explaining it correctly on the different channels, because I think most agents put their clients first and really want to make a difference in people's lives. There's nothing like making a difference in a client's life.
Yeah, 100%. And
As
as a
you know,
lawyer, I feel the same way. It's a great privilege to represent the clients I represent, and to help them in some way is very gratifying. So I agree with you.
Yeah, and I think, Jason, that it's probably also going to be a conversation, and then maybe they will guide us on how to talk to our sellers when in offering a closing cost fee for a buyer to use it in however they see fit. And then if a buyer signs a buyer broker agreement for that same amount, they're instructed to pay the agents through escrow. There's going to be a lot of different ways. Agents need to be protected, buyers need to be protected, sellers need to be protected. It almost feels like agents are not protected here, where when I first started in real estate, we didn't have the internet. We had 8 pages on I don't know if you remember carbon paper.
Oh, sure do.
And we would sit outside someone's house, write an offer in the car or on the hood, and then we'd have to present the offers to the sellers. And then, as time went on, we got used to faxes because fax machines came out. Then all of a sudden, we got used to computers coming out and buyers having Zillow. One of the questions I have for you, Jason, just to jump around just a bit, is do you feel, now that you've been on this kind of back end of it, and if you can't answer this, that's fine, that NAR has protected its realtors and done a good job in protecting us?
Yeah, I don't think I can answer that, Brad. I don't that's not one I think I'm capable.
Okay. I figured I'd throw it out there.
Well, I'll throw it right back at you. How do you feel about what NAR, how they've handled the situation?
Well, I feel taken advantage of. I feel that, with NAR and CAR, we are members and we pay our dues and we try to uphold everything that they tell us to do. I never heard about the lawsuit until the judgment came down in Kansas City. So I feel a little bit blindsided by that. I feel that through this whole thing, I think NAR did a bad job allowing Zillow from when they first came out, they allowed Zillow to take all of our realtors, all of our pictures off of the, internet, the MLS that we paid for, and then put them on their site. And then when buyers would go to Zillow would call us and say, how would you like to buy leads for your properties? So in essence, we were getting everything sold back to us, which made Zillow obviously a monster in internet real estate. And then they let Zillow go and try to open up a Zillow model of real estate, which failed miserably. So I don't think that NAR has done a great job in protecting real estate agents, brokers, or their needs. And I sure hope that there's going to be some changes, because I think we deserve it. I think we deserve to be heard. I haven't seen anything where they've said, hey, let's do a forum. Let's hear from you and what you think, and let's answer your questions. We get these little one-page emails on, let me explain to you what's going on. But this is what the judge said, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, you're a member. You have been a long time. You've been a very successful realtor, and I greatly understand why you'd feel that way, and you deserve to be heard, being, with the dues that you pay. Obviously it's no state secret that the leadership of NAR has, there have been a lot of changes in leadership over the course of this lawsuit, some related to the lawsuit, some related to other things that have happened. And so, maybe the agreement to the settlement is the beginning of a reset with the realtors in NAR, because I'm sure what you just articulated is not only your opinion, but that of many, many realtors, probably the overwhelming majority. And so hopefully, as I said, this is like a reset, and you'll feel more heard and feel like there's better leadership.
Thank you. Jason, what advice would you give to buyers navigating the market under these changing compensation structures?
Well, there was one thing before I answer that, or try to answer that. I should hasten to add that, all of the discussion that we've had about the settlement and some of the specifics, it's important to note that this is part of a class action settlement. And these changes may or may not ultimately survive,
Right.
because the class action settlement has to be given approval by a judge. And the judge is going to hear objections to the settlement. It's not specific to this case, but in any large class action settlement, there are objections, and the judge has to hear them and take them into consideration in deciding whether the settlement is what's called fair, reasonable, and adequate. And so the possibility exists that the settlement does not get approved, and in which case these rule changes may or may not take hold. I do think it's fair to say that there will be changes in the industry regardless of this settlement. But I did want to just note that, this is part of a class action settlement, and it has to be approved, and it may or may not be approved. We'll see. None of us know what will happen. In terms of buyers, what advice would I give buyers? That's a good question. I think that I would, I'm hopeful that places like the California Association of Realtors will provide good guidance as they digest the terms of the settlement and develop good information to provide to buyers and local realtor boards and the brokerages themselves. as information starts to come out, and people start to really understand how this settlement's going to work, talk to, brokers, do your, like in anything else, be informed. Go on the internet, do a lot of research, understand what's happening. I think given the shifting landscape, it's probably going to require more work on your part as a buyer to understand what's happening and put yourself in the best position possible. And so, that's the best I think I can do right now. Because again, as we've talked about many times today, there's just a lot of unknowns.
Jason, to get back to what you were just explaining to everybody about it having to be approved, are we waiting on the Department of Justice to approve it? And that's the first question. The second question is, what is their issue with real estate agents and what's going on? It seems from talking to other real estate professionals that the Department of Justice kind of has it out for us and that they don't really understand what we do in real estate.
Well, the second part of your question is more difficult to answer than the first. The first part is pretty easy. So what happens in a class action settlement is there's a settlement, and the settlement is between a defendant and the class, the plaintiff class. That gets what's called preliminarily approved. And once that's preliminarily approved, the court will authorize a notice to go out to anyone in the class. So that when you get a notice in the mail or by email, or postcard notice, or, we've all had them and seen them.
Yes.
That's been authorized by a court to send to a class so that the class member knows what their rights are, that there's been a settlement affecting some of their legal rights, whether they were, it asks them if they want to participate. They're usually automatically included in a settlement. And in order to get out of the settlement, you have to affirmatively elect to remove yourself from the settlement. And so there's a process where that notice goes out, and there'll be a deadline for people that have an interest in the settlement to object. The Department of Justice is not part of these cases that settled.
Okay.
They, however, could, and in my view, will come in and file an objection to the settlement and say, we don't think, for example, and I'm not in touch with the Department of Justice. I'm not giving away any secrets here, but they may come in and say, look, in the another class action in Massachusetts, what we said there was there should never be any compensation that essentially changes hands between a seller broker and a buyer broker. That should never happen. And that's our position.
Right.
And this settlement doesn't prohibit that. And so we don't think it goes far enough.
Yeah.
And we think we object to the settlement for that reason. That's just an example.
So Jason, let me ask you just on that note, as an attorney, would you think that it's infringing on compensation if a seller said, hey, I'm willing to give to a buyer's not a buyer's agent, excuse me, a buyer, 2.5% or 3% in closing costs to do with it however they want? Are you saying that the Department of Justice is saying, hey, and if that happens, you are not allowed to pay your agent the commission with that? Do you think that would be okay, or is it a step further?
I'm not sure, Brad. I'd have to go back and look at the specifics of what the Department of Justice said. My sense is something like that would be okay, in part because it's not the seller's broker providing
the buyer
that.
Actually providing, correct.
Yeah, it's the seller providing to the buyer,
and then the buyer
directly.
Yeah.
So and again, this is a guess, and all of this is a guess, because I don't, obviously, as I said, I am not in touch with the Department of Justice or anything like that. But that might be more palatable to them, because that's something that the seller is offering directly.
Jason, what do you think a real estate agent or real estate companies in California today should be doing to prepare for this? How should we be training agents, or us as agents get prepared? Should we be using buyer broker agreements every day now, from now on? And what other things do you think we should be doing?
Well, I think that these are complicated questions, legal questions that involve navigating a potential class action settlement. And so, at the risk of being crass, I think if you want to find out the answer, you're going to have to hire me to
That's
help
it.
navigate
Okay,
that.
good.
I would hesitate
Can we
to.
negotiate that?
All my rates are always negotiable.
Great. I mean, do you see or foresee any potential changes or reforms in real estate law or regulation that you believe we should, understand in the light of these cases? Anything that we haven't discussed?
And nothing we haven't discussed. I mean, these are changes in what I would consider real estate law, and they are likely to lead to changes in some state laws. So, for example, in California, California expressly permits the seller broker to offer compensation to the buyer broker on an MLS.
Yeah, it's in our contract in the
Right.
listing agreement. Correct.
There's a statute that says you can do it.
Mhm.
So with this settlement, which basically now says you can't, there's a conflict there between state law and what NAR agreed to, at least in California, or
Right.
at least seem to be. So you may very well see changes in law like that. There's a number of states that have similar laws like the one I just mentioned. And so there'll have to be a reconciliation, I guess, in some way between the laws on the books and what these settlements enact.
Right.
And so there, to the extent there are changes in law, things that relate to the settlement, like I just mentioned.
Jason, and thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate everything you given us some great insight.
I'll send you a bill, don't
I
worry.
know you will. Let me ask you. You mentioned that in order to settle, that anyone involved in the case on, let's say, the plaintiff side, they get a postcard, they opt in or agree, whatever. Do you think it's wrong, and you don't have to answer this as well, that NAR did not do that with its members? It didn't say, hey, here's what's going on. Let's do a Zoom about this so we can all talk about it, or there could be almost like a town hall, or B, vote on whether or not we're going to settle. Vote on whether or not. I mean, we're 1 million members strong or whatever it is, and they make a lot of money on us, and we pay them for them to protect us. And if I need to hire you right now, I will. It's just you gotta.
Well, I mean, they largely did procure a release from liability for a significant number of members. And so I don't know why anyone would need to vote on that if NAR was negotiating a settlement that would release them from liability. They wouldn't even have to pay anything. I think the harder questions are, where the NAR settlement left certain segments of the realtor community, exposed and having to pay money to either opt into the settlement, or it just didn't cover them in some way. And so those people, I would think, have a more legitimate gripe. I'm not going to get into what NAR should or should not have done, but or how it operates in terms of whether it should add a town hall, or maybe they did.
And I didn't know about it, right?
Yeah, I just don't know the answer to that. So I guess I kind of answered it, but kind of
No, you
punted.
did, and I get it, and I'm putting you in a murky situation by asking the questions. But I feel that as people are listening, there are questions that just might
Sure.
They're thinking, and you have the option of obviously discussing them or not. Are there any common misconceptions or questions that you've encountered from the public or real estate professionals about these legal issues that you'd like to address that maybe we haven't addressed?
Well, I think I've mentioned some of the misconceptions already. This does not quote unquote slash the 6%. How commissions are affected, what they settle out at, all of that will remains to be seen. We don't know yet. And so I think and even that it causes drastic changes remains to be seen. It's hard to know how everything will work out at this point. There certainly are changes, and there's no denying that. How it all plays out in reality, on paper, there are changes. How it plays out in reality is another question. We'll just have to see.
Jason, where can listeners follow you or your work, or get in touch with you for more information on these topics, or maybe they want to hire you for a real estate case or a civil class action suit for anything? Where could they get in touch with you?
Sure. Thanks, Brad. They could email me at jzweig@bartco, BARTKO law.com, jzweig@bartcolaw.com. They could visit our website, which is bartcolaw.com, and learn about our firm or learn about me and my profile, or LinkedIn. If they want to find me on LinkedIn, Jason A. Zweig, ZWEIG. One of those three ways should get
in touch with you. That's great. Jason, do you have any final thoughts or key takeaways you'd like to leave our audience with regarding the future of real estate, actually?
I think we covered a lot of ground, and just nothing that I haven't already said other than to just thank you for giving me a chance to talk to you today. And I've enjoyed it, and enjoyed seeing you and talking to you. And I hope, as I do with all of my clients, I hope some people find it helpful, and it helps them give them a little bit more clarity in what's otherwise a very murky situation.
It is. And before we go, Jason, I just wanted to ask you, what made you get into law, especially class action suits, and what attracted you to real estate class action suits?
I've always been interested in law. I think it's an intellectually stimulating area. The class action plaintiff side of litigation is particularly challenging, often because it involves contingency fee recoveries, which means you're not getting paid for significant periods of time. And so it's until you win the case. So it's something that comes with significant challenge, and that's something I've enjoyed. On the real estate side, to be quite honest, it wasn't as much that I found the real estate law in these cases as much as the clients found my firm, and thankfully and gratefully hired us to help them navigate the situation.
Yeah, you've really been fabulous, and especially with answering questions and just being there, for me at least, to answer questions and help guide me. So I do appreciate you and all your wisdom. And anyone out there listening, go ahead.
I'm here for you and for any of your listeners.
Yeah, and anyone out there listening, please get in touch with Jason Zweig. He's absolutely unbelievable. It's been a great day at ATRE Podcast, All Things Real Estate. And remember, like my dad always said, have an attitude of gratitude. Be thankful for what we have. And that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Many of my podcast listeners have become my coaching clients. If you'd like to be a coaching client, go to my website at www.atrepodcast.com and sign up for your free 30-minute coaching evaluation at www.atrepodcast.com. And as my dad would always say, have an attitude of gratitude.